I also want to let you all know if anyone has any need for captions, it should be available. It's one of the reasons we're using Zoom. So if anyone wants to use captions, if you go to the 3 dots in more, there's a captions button and you should be able to just say show captions. That can be really helpful. Sometimes the translation of people speaking is a little bit iffy, but if you need it, it's there. And if you have any technical questions, again, I'm going to loop you to Courtney if she's fine with that, for fielding any of those questions. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and immediately mess up my slides. Great. Okay. Here we are, meeting 3. Let me get my notes up. Okay. So today is sort of getting into the nitty-gritty a little bit more of why we're here, what we're going to do, and trying to set our own agenda a bit. I'm hoping that little bar isn't in the way. So I'm going to do some housekeeping stuff for a minute. We're going to talk about committee goals. I'm going to introduce the RFP process to you, and then we'll talk about public engagement a bit. If you are a member of the public who's joining us today, we're going to take public comment at the end of the meeting and just reserve the time for the committee to try to get through their work in the little bit of time that we have. We're so happy you're here, though. There is a Google form that I can put, whose link I can put in the chat. But if you can't stay to the end of the meeting and you want to leave a comment, please feel free to do so there. You can also always go to the Summer Voice page and leave questions, comments there. Okay, so thanks everyone for your answers to the poll questions. As I wrote in my email, we're going to keep these meetings to 5:15. Try that out. And then I'll stick around till 5:30. Anyone who wants to hang around for a little bit longer and chat about stuff. I always miss the opportunities at the end of meetings to, you know, just talk about things that have come up. And I think that's something you really lose in virtual meeting space. So that's something that if you want to stick around, you can. But if you need to leave at 4 or earlier than that, that's fine too. Renee, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. I'm taking notes today, and I'm not sure if I'm just supposed to take them on my own and send them to you later, or if there's a shared doc we're supposed to be taking them on.
Thank you for asking me about that. I think if you just take them on your own and then send them to me. Amy took them in the agenda document the last time, which was a pretty easy way to just kind of like, okay, this section, we're talking about these things. Does that work for you?
So you're okay if I use that, the agenda?
Yeah, and you can just send me that Word document afterward and I'll make it a PDF and
sure.
yeah, great. So I'm going to stick around till 5:30. If you need to leave at 5, that's fine. If you can stay, great. The videos are posted online finally. Thank goodness. We now have a workflow for that. So they should be posted shortly after, like within a couple of days of our meetings now. But if you missed any of the former meetings, you can go back and look at them if you want. The breakout rooms don't get recorded, so that's the only thing that is missing from those. But otherwise, there's a record there. People seemed interested in the idea of a field trip, which is great. And I wonder if anyone has any ideas. This might just be like, you know, if you had a thought of a place that might be nice for us to meet up in person, ideally relevant to what we're talking about within the vicinity. Somerville might be great, but if there's something nearby, that would be a great example for us to look at. I wonder if anyone has any thoughts, and I can kind of work on scheduling that.
How about the pollinator area at Morse Kelly?
Morse Kelly. Yeah.
The Alewife Brook Reservation is always nice.
Well, I haven't been there in so long. Yeah.
Is the goal to see like an example of pollinator habitat, or just to have an outdoor space that we're going to meet each other in person?
I guess my thought was just a chance for us to, you know, have some more casual conversation in person. So, but if we get the added bonus of seeing something great, that's nice too.
Yeah, Claire mentioned the growing center. That's a good spot too.
Any consensus or?
Growing center sounds really good, actually. We have good space for lots of people getting together.
I would agree on the growing center.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else? Okay, I'll try to put together a growing center idea for us. There's some different opinions on when would be the best time, so we might have to, it might not be something that everybody can come to, but I'll try my best to take what people were interested in and make something work. But okay, that's great. Google Doc, thanks. Some folks have already been in there. That's wonderful. It's your resource, so use it as you see fit. I just wanted to check with everyone if we want to keep this as a sort of committee internal document only, and if we agree to that, if that sounds good, and we just like, at the moment I have it where it's only shared to your email addresses. If you need it shared to a Gmail address or something and just request access, that's fine. But just for the time being, do we want to keep this internal only for our own sort of musings and thoughts? And it could be something we make public at some point if we want, or does anyone have any other thoughts about that?
So you explained to us last meeting that these are not subject to open meeting law rules. Is that correct?
Correct.
So under that technicality, we would not necessarily have to share this document. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
In your experience, is it better to have an open document where anyone in the world could come in and do whatever they want to it, or just leave it open only to this committee so that we can give thoughts and questions until such time as we are ready to present something?
I mean, I think in my experience, depends on how often people are using it. You know, if no one's really using it and it's sort of a record of something, then it doesn't really matter that much how many people have access to it. But if it's something that we're actively involved with and thoughts are changing, and I guess my sense is that fewer cooks in the kitchen can be beneficial. As it's kind of, you know, from what I gathered last week, it would just sort of be nice to be like, these are the thoughts we had in our discussion. And so this would be a place for you all to be keeping some of those notes. I mean, we'll have the minutes that are always on the Summer Voice page and available for public record as well. So
I guess the reason I ask is this is kind of new to me, but if I looked at these questions and had thoughts and typed out answers, would those be available to everyone in the committee and to look at and say, oh, what a bunch of BS he's writing to us, or whatever?
yes. So you could
Okay.
like comment on each other's notes in there, or you can, you know, I think Lisa or Judy was in there earlier today leaving a couple of comments. So yeah, but they're public for all of us to see at the moment.
Okay, because I was in there and looking at it and made my own notes on my tablet, but not in the document itself.
Yeah. It's like a group note-taking place,
Yeah,
if
okay.
that's useful. Yeah, Cynthia, I see you.
I vote keeping it for committee. with the option to make it public once we're done. But I like the idea of having it just be a working document within this group, because we're looking at the same information and having a conversation between ourselves. For the reasons you cited, I think it would be good to have fewer cooks in the kitchen.
See some nods. Anybody else have any strong opinions on it, or?
Are there any like rules? For instance, if someone says something with which I disagree, what are the rules for disagreement? I certainly don't want to be mean or nasty or anything like that, but what if I mean, it can clearly happen. Someone could say something to which I strongly disagree. How would we handle that?
And there are rules of engagement, I think.
Yeah,
That was
here somewhere I saw those.
yeah.
I forget.
Yeah, they're in the former slides. I can make those sort of available as their own page, even within the document, if that would be nice. But it's kind of up to you all to decide, I think. So,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, my sense is that just respecting people's opinions and finding a way to respond, knowing that, we're each bringing our own experience and expertise to the table, and those opinions may conflict at some point, but certainly discussion and disagreement is, a right place for moving ideas forward sometimes. So, okay. So maybe just for now, I'll put the rules of engagement in there. We'll keep it just as a committee working document, just something to keep in mind for yourselves. If you need to share it to a different email address or something like that, totally fine, but that we'll keep it as an internal document for the time being, and we can decide to make things public later if we want to. All good. Great. I also just wanted to make space for if anyone has any relevant events or anything coming up that they want to let the committee know about. We can have a moment to do that. Oh, Lisa, sorry, I can't see everyone, so you can also just speak up.
I can put the details in. It's on the Growing Center's website, but Russ Cohen's doing an edible natives talk. It's not all pollinators, but pollinators on next Tuesday in collaboration with the Mystic Charles Pollinator Pathways folks.
When did you say that was?
It is. Oh, it's tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Yeah.
I'm away. I'm like, I'll put a note in the.
Great. Hi, Renee, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, this is also last minute. On Wednesday, the 10th, there's a pesticides and pollinators hearing at the State House starting at 1 o'clock. If you want to testify in person or online, the deadline is 5 o'clock today, so we will be in the middle of our meeting. However, written testimony is can be submitted. There's no deadline at this point, so it's worth, I can put a link in to get some information about it. It's worth looking into. There are many different bills that impact pesticide use, and there's a bill to try to form a committee for to look at pollinators and their health. So worthwhile stuff.
Great plug. Great. Okay, perfect, thanks. So let's dig in. I wanted to just kind of get you all talking initially before we get into sort of like city procedure stuff, which can be a little dry, admittedly. So let's just like start off by like, I just sort of want to get a sense from you all of your thinking at this point of like, what is your why about like, why do you think this plan needs to exist? What is the intention of the plan, you know, in your own mind? And then the why, like we as a city need to be doing this plan. I keep coming back to this question because Kat left us with it at the end of her talk as like our task next is to figure out like, what is our why are we doing this, who is it for, as kind of one of the framing things that we need to be clear about as we try to define the boundaries of the plan that we're looking to create eventually. So just open it up for I'm gonna stop my sharing for a second just to make that a little bit easier. Yeah, just open it up for you all at this point. Just for some conversation about what you're thinking at this point.
I'll just throw out there that kind of my pitch to people as to why this is an issue that they should care about, or why it's something that merits kind of significant public attention, really has to do with the amount of time that the city is putting into land use studies and curb use studies, and being very intentional about the extremely limited land that we have in an urban environment, understanding that all of the things that are necessary for a natural environment to occur are hindered by a reduced land space. And so items of biodiversity, areas where we are already going to be at a disadvantage from places with more open space, we need to actually work a little bit harder to maintain. And so the argument that I really put out to people is it's all part of land use. And it is all part of kind of the efficient use of city resources to make sure that we can continue to have development in the city and make sure that we're able to maintain our open spaces.
So Jack, for you, is the who, the audience, the city then, or?
Yeah, so I think like all good public-private kind of operations, it is, the city and the really, the uber attentive, 5% of the city that will do something active with that information. But I really do think, there's two kind of audiences that we're selling to, right? There's kind of the policymakers, both formal and informal. And there is the broader public who I think we also want, a lot of these activities that are going to support urban pollinators are volunteer driven. So I think there's also kind of the much wider audience that we need to convince this is something that it's worth your time to volunteer in and help, your community garden, help fulfill this small local project. So I think we're probably playing to a whole multitude of audience, but I think there's kind of the big two of there's the formal and informal policymakers, and there's people you want to convince to get on board with those plans at the same time. But it's a good way to start thinking about kind of all the different audiences that I'm sure we're thinking about.
Yeah, I guess for me, as someone who works for the city, I see it as a useful thing for those of us who work for the city to sort of identify locations that would be the most beneficial to make better pollinator habitat, to make these corridors that pollinators need, to make it more vibrant in spots where there's just little habitat right now. But also, I agree with you that it also needs to speak to a broader audience, and there needs to be at least part of it that's encouraging people to make pollinator habitat on their private property. 2/3 of the city is owned by private property owners. So we need to make sure that we are speaking to them as well as city staff. So I totally agree with what you said. That's a lot of what I've been thinking about too.
Many years ago, when I was fresh out of college, I was trying to work as a wildlife biologist before I went to law school and did all that. And I worked with a wildlife biologist who said that the guiding thing for him was trying to do right for the critters. And I've always felt that's been sort of my guiding light as well. And I have in my own small ways tried really hard to increase not only, well, the open space in the city, doing little things like saving Lincoln Park from development as a school, which Lisa was part of, and finding small plots of land to buy through the Community Preservation Act and stuff like that. But I think it's important to think of it this way. Somerville is the most densely populated city in the Northeast. It is in many ways a pavement desert. But despite that, pollinators survive here. If you plant anything in your garden and pay attention to who comes to pollinate your flowers, you'd be amazed at the number of species of bees and other things that you get. And I think that what we should be doing is working to, another wildlife biologist told me he hates this word, but mitigate the impacts of what humans have done to the environment that is Somerville. And by doing so, intentionally trying to increase the diversity of species that allow pollinators and other insects and other animals to diversify within the city. That's what my guiding light is.
Okay, I'll jump in and ask a question, which Michael, just as a follow-up and anyone can answer. One thing I keep coming back to, as someone that obviously very much cares about the critters as well, you know, like, how do you tie in, like, can the plan exist purely for the critters, or do we need it to be, you know, both like a document written that will sort of clearly read to people who don't necessarily already believe that like spending a bunch of time on fostering pollinator habitat is a good thing? Like is that something that we need to do? Does it convince that audience as well of this mission? Or is it, you know, do we operate by trying to, you know, I think Jack, as you were talking about, connect with some of those very involved citizens already, and like allow them to be kind of the spores, you know, that are like spreading out throughout the city. Yeah.
I think the answer is twofold. One, it's about the critters. I think that we should work to increase all available pollinator habitat in the city that we can. And then if we can, involve people. But, you know, like the Morris Kelly was done by a very extremely small group of activists who decided they wanted to ask the city for money and did it. So, you know, I don't think that's going to be a lot more larger group of people than that. But the other thing is, I sort of feel like we need to force the city to do the right thing. Because I've been involved in a few things as a conservation commissioner and as a private citizen. And I don't always feel like the city does the right thing, and I get pissed off. And, you know, they want to develop open spaces with too much pavement and too much allowance for dogs and stuff like that, things that bother me personally. And I think that we should do what we can to force the city to move in the other direction. And that's kind of what I see as part of what this plan is for. So I guess I'm not sure that the audience is the public in general, although certainly they are part of the audience. I think the audience is for the city itself. Because the city needs to be forced to do what I think is the right thing.
Can I add? This is David. I'm very much in agreement with that. It's that I would love to add that in every situation, it's really the humans on the ground that are influencing all of this, and we will be for forever. And a big part of what needs to happen is the relationship that people have with their land has to be developed. People don't know these plants. People don't know these issues. People in the city especially don't have access to these things. When is the last time you saw some native bee balm growing anywhere in eastern Massachusetts? These are not easy things to find, and especially in the middle of Somerville. There's a huge educational component and a huge part of it where you're really just developing a culture of respect and interaction and stewardship with the land, with the plants. And we're really doing this. We're doing this for pollinators. A healthy environment for pollinators means a healthy environment for everybody. We're talking about clean air. We're talking about healthy soils. We're talking about trees that actually will grow to be 150 years old. They're not going to grow 150 years old if we are just mulching and watering them with dogs. That's not going to happen. But if those trees have plants that are developing the soil around them, they have a chance to reach some real old age. All of those issues are intertwined, and it all has to do with the way our average dog walker sees the land. The tree is not just a place for your dog to go. The tree has dignity in and of itself. Everything here does. It has to do with people loving their city, in my opinion. I think that's what our plan needs to realize, is that we have to help people develop a relationship with these other creatures that we share the land with. Did you guys hear that?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
And I would just like to echo that, David, because I do feel it's about the relationships. I was trying to pull the words together, but it's kind of what you were saying, that the healthier ecological balance is also healthier for the humans here as well. And how to acknowledge that, really a lot of it does come about down to the relationships, and feeling connected. I also feel that just relying on people who are already turned on partly misses the boat. That just as there's shifting a municipal system to maybe shifting the values a bit around a different way of landscaping, using the land. My own limited experience just through the Growing Center and, watching people get excited about the work that Earthwise Aware does and people learning and understanding. There are a lot of new people who I think could be part of this, that we want to make sure there's some inroads and it's connector points. Where are the nodes, in a system? There's different nodes of connection. Where are those? And how, for whatever primary audience this is for, I see the need for those connector points.
Go for it, Renee.
David, thank you for saying that. I think that you said that beautifully, and I agree. And Michael, I agree with you as well. One thing I am hoping to see, in addition to those beautiful sentiments, is a way for the city to, I feel like too often we get tied up in, honestly, it feels like fear, but it's this sort of, we strangle ourselves in trying, worrying about doing things the right way. And I don't mean that we shouldn't do them the right way. And I don't mean that we shouldn't have community process, but we tend to sort of at the expense of doing something that would be really meaningful, we get bogged down in a lot of detail. I'm not saying this very well, but I'm hopeful that this plan will give the city the structure, the outline to be able to do things that needs to be done in a quicker way. Like, too often you'll see a small patch, like, oh my gosh, that would be a beautiful, pollinator garden, but oh shoot, we can't do it because we were too late. And so if we have this sort of overarching guidebook for us, hopefully we won't miss out on a lot of these other opportunities in the future. Where right now I think we just sort of trip over ourselves, and then it's like, oh shoot, well that piece is gone, so let's look for the next spot, and then we usually miss that one too. So yeah, that's my hope, is that it offers a path.
I'm just thinking back to a statistic Vanessa mentioned about 2/3 of the available land being private property, and going back to what Jack was talking about of, there being two main groups, which is a framing that makes a lot of sense to me. I hear what you're saying about emphasizing the city, but to me, it seems to unnecessarily narrow the scope to out of the gate say, let's not focus so much on the public stuff. And I think the public stuff is important. I'm thinking back to part of the conversation we had in our breakout room last meeting. We were talking a little bit about environmental justice. And I think we're going to need to be very intentional and clear in communicating the link between, for example, public health and pollinator health. And I don't know. I don't want to give up on the public education piece, because I get the sense that the city can do a lot, but not nearly as much as we can do with a broader audience.
I think that's a great point. And I think something that kind of comes into that, speaking of kind of the broader audience, is, we're intending this to be a, something for our city. I'm sure that it will be something which, when other cities go to do research and do pollinator plans, as I've kind of been bubbling around the internet and finding lots of things from Washington and Oregon, I'm sure it'll also be something that kind of provokes discussion in other places too. And so I think that that's a great, point to point that we do have this, much broader audience within our own city, in surrounding communities. A lot of these plans wind up involving kind of regional components that come in there. It would actually, that's kind of a great point to say, are there, I know Cambridge has done some work in this area, but that's a good question, kind of like, are there neighboring communities that have, had successes in particular areas that we should be trying to emulate or learn from their stalled proposals, or even things that we could see kind of an additive effect of working together on something with, that could actually have kind of a multiplicative effect.
I'll just throw out a different perspective. I hope that some of the work of this plan will help to open up awareness around different maintenance practices. I think that they're just, even from the homeowner to landscaping companies, they've been systematically trained in a very particular way for generations and generations. And I think that the work that we can talk about will start to open up avenues of different types of maintenance, different job opportunities, different paths to start thinking about what it means to be a land steward in the future. So that's like, I think, just, we can't have the same lawnmowers and weed whackers and dumping mulch as like so many companies are trained, you know, in 20 minutes, this is your job, just go do it and collect a bill. So I think we need to talk more about being aware of phenology and different moments that plants can start to tell us different things about how to maintain the land.
Anyone who hasn't said anything wanna share before we move on? This is so great. Thank you all so much. Okay, we'll keep talking about this. This is great. And we'll loop around to some of these ideas again in a little bit. So hang on to these ideas. Thank you, Renee, for taking notes on them, because I do feel like this is the meat of what we need to figure out. You know, the consultant will do some of this work, but some of it is us defining what the work of the consultant is. And so, you know, having these conversations, making decisions related to these types of topics is going to be key to shaping that work. Okay. So I'm going to go through that work a little bit more. So just as a reminder, we're in this phase 1, and our real goal here, in addition to educating ourselves, getting ourselves up to snuff, is to assist in the development of a request for proposal, or an RFP. That will then bring on a consultant, and that'll lead us into part 2 and the kind of development of the plan itself. So what is an RFP? A request for proposal is, in essence, it's a document that solicits proposals from interested parties. So it contains a whole lot of legalese. This is a very highly legislated process. So there's lots of legal protections for everyone involved. It's going to lay out, though, critically, a lot of information about how this process works. And the project itself. Excuse me. So this is where an interested firm is going to go to look and see what we hope to get out of the project as a whole, and what we expect from them. It also narrows down the pool of applicants by describing the minimum qualifications that they need to meet in order to be chosen for a project like this. So it doesn't mean that we will consider everyone, but that we are going to decide what we think is important for someone who we're going to hire to write this plan, what kinds of experiences we think they need to have under their belt already in order to be chosen. This whole document is not your actual task, but the scope of work within it is your task. So a lot of what my job will be, with the support of, you know, my city team, will be to work on the, you know, kind of like legalese parts, finessing it. You know, we're paid to do the kind of full writing of this, but your job will be to really craft what the scope of this project is. And this is the piece of the document that's pretty essential for letting the consultant know the details of the project, the process, and what we expect the outcomes to be, both what their deliverables are along the way. So if we want them to run a certain number of public meetings, this is something we include in this document. If we want them to give us a draft at this point, and then this point, and then this point, this is something we include in the document. And it's gonna kind of give us all a sense of what a successful project is, and how we're gonna get there. So this whole process is gonna be, you know, project managed by folks in the city, I guess me, and then also procurement and contracting services is the department within the city that really oversees this whole process. And that's because hiring someone for a large project like this is governed by Massachusetts state laws, which define a very clear set of rules that we have to follow. So PCS knows all of those rules. They guide us through that process. Vanessa and Courtney, and probably Breck too, have been through this many times. I'm just learning about it as I go along in my job and other projects. And so if you all have any questions, you can ask me, Vanessa, Courtney, and all of that. But mostly what we want to do to set you up for success is not to sort of overwhelm you with like, you know, we need to fill in the date here and the date here and the name here, but to get you to be thinking about the specific scope document itself. And one of the reasons why we go through this whole like legislated process is to make sure that there's an an even playing field for anyone who's applying for this work. It's a way of ensuring that there's no favoritism within the city, and to, you know, make sure that anyone who's applying will be considered equally. So going forward, we're at the end of meetings 3-ish, getting there. What I'm going to do is within the next couple of weeks, I'm going to send you kind of a structure for this scope. And our next meeting will be, our task will be to discuss that document. It'll give you kind of a framework, and then we'll be filling it in, editing it, changing it through our discussions and collaborative work here, so that I'm getting your opinions, and we're taking all of the notes and conversations that we have, decisions that you all make as a team, and then I will spend some time finessing that, and then send it back and forth to you all for review. But so you're not going to get a blank piece of paper to start with, but you're going to get a framework that then we can discuss in more detail. My hope is that by mid-July, we'll be able to put this document out to bid, and I'll go over what that timeline will look like a bit. And once that's out to bid, we'll then take a break while we are waiting for bids to come in. I can't really see this top part because this little bar is in the way, but I think that I know what it says. So, okay, this is Jen. I hope you can see number 1. I don't know if that's hidden from your view. Okay, great, perfect. So we're going to develop this document. I'm going to give all of that package to PCS. And beforehand, we can collect information about consultants that we might be interested in. But one of the most important things is that once this goes out to bid, and what that means is we give the package to PCS, they advertise it and release it. And once that happens, there can be no communication with any potential consultant after that time. This is one of the ways that we ensure an even playing field and that no favoritism is happening. Within the 1 to 2 month process, when it goes out to bid, we'll receive questions from potential bidders, we'll provide answers, we get those bids, and then there's a formal meeting where all of those bids are opened at the exact same time. What's unique about this particular process is that we have the option as a committee of interviewing any of the consultants that we might want to bring on. Partly that's because it's really important for us to talk about, or to get a lot of public buy-in for this process. Like, we don't want to be making these decisions alone as a city. We want you all to be involved in that choice-making process for who we hire to write this plan. So we'll probably be taking the time to do so once we get those bids in, probably in late September. So you can expect to receive a draft hopefully by the end of this week from me. Take a look at it, make some notes, think about edits, think about conversation we're having today, conversation we had a couple weeks ago, the other examples you've seen, and then we'll do kind of a brainstorming session at our next meeting to imagine how we'd like to craft, form, and edit that document. Any questions at this point about that process? It's okay if it's a little fuzzy, but there's also the procurement page has lots of examples of both open and closed bids from the past. and present if you're interested in seeing what these look like and flipping through those pages. Or you
Allison,
can,
Did you
Yeah.
share the link to that?
Yeah.
I don't know where to find the procurement page.
and I'm sorry, Allison, can you
Courtney,
say
would
the
you do
name?
that for me? Go ahead, Renee.
Sure can.
Sorry. Allison, I'm just wondering, is it CPS, PCS? What does that stand for?
Procurement and contracting services. Used to just be called purchasing, I think, but now they have a longer name.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah. Courtney will put the link in the chat. You can browse through it. You can also read the laws that govern this if you're interested. I have yet to take like a full procurement training. So this is like a very involved legislated process that I'm still learning too. So it's not simple.
All right, Allison, just a clarifying question here. What you're sending us a draft of soon is the scope of work, correct? Okay.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So I think that'll just be a few pages. You know, this whole document can be like close to 100 pages, depending on the project. But you know, what we like, the sort of critical piece that we'll be crafting that defines the project is the scope. Yeah, okay. Great. All right, so if there are no further questions about that, just know there's more to come. Once you see that document, you may have some other questions come up. That would make sense, and you can shoot those to me. If there are enough questions, I can send out a clarification email to the whole group before our next meeting. But just it'll give you a sense once you're able to look through that text a bit more. Okay. And just know nothing, we're not asking anything like highly technical from you all. It'll all be within, you know, the realm of your own expertise and knowledge. And as a group, I think it's going to go great. Okay, so coming back a little bit to the discussion that we had at the start of this meeting, just wanted to kind of remind you all that part of the goal of bringing this committee together is to bring together a group of folks who are active in the community, who can build support, who can educate, and who can help us understand how to make this plan the most effective for, you know, all of Somerville. And we want to know like how to do that in the best way that we can. So I wanted to open this up again to some conversation to talk about public engagement. I thought it was really interesting that when Kat read through those other plans that she noted that for some public engagement was referenced, but not core to the process. And so I'm curious from you all, you know, from what you've read so far, from what you've been thinking about, what your sense is of what we want to be communicating to the public and what we want the public to communicate to us. So the consultant, just to keep in mind, through their process of writing this plan, will run some public meetings. That will likely be a piece of what we ask them to do to get them kind of get the public up to date on what the process is, to get feedback and all of that. So if you can think about what our role is as a committee for engaging with the public, for involving the public in this, what do you think might be most important to help us get the most successful plan we can to both be communicating and to try to hear back from the public?
Just the first thing I think of is just that I remember there were a lot of people who applied to be on this committee, like more people than I would have expected. And so I don't have a fully formed thought with that, but somehow getting those people involved and letting them know about these meetings, encouraging them to bring people in. If you know that if you already have that kind of list of interested people, that's somewhere to start in terms of getting the word out. That's not a fully, that's not a fully engaged idea. That's the first thing that came to my head. I have to think
Yeah,
a little
that's
bit more
great.
about
And
other
that
ideas.
makes me realize I should let you know that we've had some people sign up through the Summer Voice page who want to know about events and things like that. I'm sending them an email every time we've got a new meeting coming up to give them a heads up. I have let the other applicants know that as well, and I'll keep sort of this ongoing mailing list of people to inform. But certainly the getting the word out is like, you only get so far with a city web page, but yes, we had 50 people apply. And so that is a one place we want to, one resource we want to tap for sure. Yeah.
I just want to plug that it's also probably good for us to keep in mind who's not in the room, who's not applying, as another source to hear a different perspective. I can say overwhelmingly, the people that are interested the most in this work tend to be middle-aged white women.
I think it's really critical to get kids involved. Get the schools, a lot of the schools already have some gardens, and I think kids get it. So anyway, we can reach out to them.
This is like, I haven't thought this through or anything, but it seems that the people that are going to be the hardest to get are the people who don't know about, haven't thought about even what pollinators are, and I don't know anything about this movement that's going forward in Somerville. And I don't know exactly, you'd have to come up with some kind of brochure or something, but I would think going door to door like candidates do, and knocking on doors and saying, hey, did you know about this? And, kind of trying to at least open people's eyes to the fact that this is an ongoing process and that they might be interested in it, or their kids might be interested in it. And the same kind of information could be used in the schools. Getting parents, you could offer them something they could take to the schools or whatever. So I'm not sure exactly how to implement it, but it seems like the only way really to reach people who are not sort of plugged into the city and the internet and everything is the old fashioned door to door, or maybe even a mailing. I'm not sure.
Hi, David, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, Alejandra, I see you too.
I'd suggest that it would be really wonderful, like a lot of the pollinator plans that we looked at, obviously plant lists and etc. But maybe also delving a little bit more into management techniques. I think that one of the things that people respond to nicely is like history of the land. And so like pictures of what Somerville might have looked, in 16, whatever. Or what the pollinators are, which pollinators are here, what plants make sense, how to make a pollinator garden that isn't a mess is a big thing for folks. I think, what was I just gonna say? Shoot. All right, I'm done for now, I guess.
If you think of it, you can jump back in. Alejandra, go ahead. I also just want to say that I think there's one component of like, what do we tell them in the plan itself and what do we tell them in the process of the plan? So just think about both of those things as like, while we're in the process of it, I'm making notes about both. Renee's got notes on both. We both, like, those are essential, but I want to hear about both those things.
Yeah, I don't have too many thoughts or I guess answers for the how do we engage the public in the process of creating the action plan? But I think sort of tying in a lot of the points that many of you have shared on what would be helpful to engage a diverse public and a diverse audience. So one of the things that, and Lisa and Michael will know this much better than I do, but one of the things that Mystic River Watershed Association does to engage our environmental justice communities is really be where they are, at sort of, the classic meet them where they are, but also a lot of engaging educational materials that are family friendly, a lot of engagement events that really capture the attention of people who are already in the spaces that the plan might be attempting to make more pollinator friendly. So not necessarily people who are reaching out to the city or reaching out in this regard, but people who are just in the space. I don't know how this committee in particular can sort of access that public or really carry out those endeavors. But I think one of the key things in the action plan and sort of the deliverables that we're talking about, the scope of work, would be a set of materials that smaller local organizations can distribute that are that are kid friendly but are also adult friendly, guides for fostering pollinators in your own backyard, but also education materials for how to spot them out in your community. So it kind of encompasses both the education aspect of it and then the sort of fostering that relationship to your own land within your city, within your backyard, or even if it's just like container gardening for people. So a guide that for residents of Somerville that fosters pollinators and encompasses people who have no land, people who have, a window box to a backyard. So that would be my thought.
Claire, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. I just want to mention very briefly two things. One is the need for redefining what beauty is in our cities. We have a tendency to think of, natural or native wildflowers are being ugly or weeds. So that's definitely something that we need to change. The second thing that I want to raise is we talk about kids and about middle-aged women, white. We're missing radically one layer of the population, actually on multiple accounts, the young one in their 20s, in their 30s, and they are very important. We see them as interns and they don't feel they are necessarily listened. They don't feel that they are necessarily part of the deal. They need to be part of the deal. The other thing that I want to mention that also adds to that point is that about half of the household do not have kids. So we need to have these young ones, this generation of the 20s, 30s, and maybe even 40s to be part of the story, right? So going to university, community centers, or these kind of things, we need to bring them in. We need to have all generations, all demographics talking and working, acting together.
I really like that idea. I think that I imagine one of the best ways to do that would be to have a core project, someplace where we can really develop these interactions. We can have different events. I really think that like the bike path makes the most sense as a place for us to develop. Obviously as a corridor, but what you could do is you could have different gardens along it, different projects in different neighborhoods all along the corridor. You know what I mean? And hopefully be reaching out to various people in those areas and trying to get people, actually hands-on, trying to get actual labor out of folks, and which is hard when you have to train and you have to make sure things are done, but anyway, if we had kind of a central project that at least for the first year or two everybody could kind of rally around, and that's the thing about the bike path, is that it is long. and it connects with natural areas on both ends, you know, it makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways that you could develop messaging around. Anyway.
Just if I may just add that, I like that a lot because somehow it travels through the city, so you can really reach out to different demographic. And to talk about this core project, you know, you can use multi-facets of this project, from the planting to monitoring, you know, what are on these plants. Some people who know me there know that you can also involve science in order to understand what gets on your plant, right? So, and then you reinforce somehow, you know, you start to have something that is really evidence-based in terms of, okay, this is what it does, this is what it brings into our surroundings, right?
Lisa, go for it.
I love the concept of the bike path, but as someone who was the Conservation Commission agent years ago, there are some use restrictions on some areas of that for kids in particular. So we do also need to recognize that there's multiple histories in the land that we're using. So we had to, there were some issues, David, and we had to do events without kids. So just FYI for the bike path. There's
because of the soil, because of
yeah, and yeah, the land, there were multiple land uses along that area, and I don't know who still has those maps, but we can look at them. Doesn't mean that you can't have education and
right,
opportunities, but yeah,
Just
all that is so valuable, all that land use history, if people could see, you know.
and
Anyway,
originally
yeah.
the bike path was, the hope was to have meadows along it, so I would love to see that actually happen.
just awareness that bike path is owned by the state. Where the city's not allowed to do anything without state permission.
A great state project.
Is it the
Sounds
state or the
wonderful.
MBTA?
It's the MBTA.
MBTA.
Also, doesn't MassDOT have that stretch between Lowell Street and Cedar Street?
I think the lines between MassDOT and MBTA are very blurred when it comes to easement and access and licensing agreements along things like a bike path, because it was a former trail or rail corridor. So it's a, you know, the agreements tend to go to the same people.
Okay.
It still seems to me like it's worth investigating, unless we come up with another plan, obviously. But we're also not talking about the entire length of the bike path, where we can break it up into pieces, little pieces. These can be little gardens, you know, it can be, you know, 1,000 square feet or something.
David, I think what I'm hearing you talk about is that having a place, something that grounds this work and grounds, you know, the engagement work in the city would be useful. That having a, you know, a location where we can host events, where you can be kind of visible to the public, where people can casually engage or intentionally engage and learn along the way. And that might mean a pilot project of some kind. This is something that's sort of come up in passing, and we've been having, you know, sort of internal casual conversations about, and I do think is an interesting concept. You know, we have a year-long process for our, you know, planning thing. There are lots of opportunities for longer term stuff that I think would be great. And so if people are interested in the idea of a place, you know, where within the next year we can be engaging with people, that's something that might limit some of the choices we make about what that looks like or where that is. But that's something we could certainly talk about if I'm understanding you correctly, David, and your priorities there.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. It's just like that is so perfect. I mean, I can't.
I know.
Everybody mixes there. It's just like this place where the whole city is connected. You know, it's symbolic. Anyway, whatever. It doesn't work. I get it.
No, there's places, but I would also back to what Alejandro was saying is are there places in other ends of the city? I'm thinking along, state, but pilot is in demonstrations, I think are key because that's how you get people and being where people are. But people are also at, playing fields and other places. And I've seen some really interesting mixes where you've got people who don't necessarily care about pollinators, but all of a sudden they see this garden pop up and all kinds of conversations happen because of these new adjacencies where there wasn't something before. So I think that there might be a wealth of small pockets scattered around, including somewhere.
One place I want to get to eventually is to, like if we have goals that might be for the whole year, that's great. That might be one thing that we make choices about. For the longer term, we want to do blank. Maybe for the shorter term, we want to do blank, like if there are ways that we think getting feedback, if it's maybe the question is it an educational mission or is it a feedback gathering mission? Are we trying to learn from the public? Are we trying to share information with public? Is it both? You almost got a thought, Alejandra.
Do I guess I'm like trying to form. So I think if it's an effort towards spreading information, education, materials or events, however that may be, I think it definitely should also be a two-way street so as not to be, extractive in any way. As sometimes we do outreach in our environmental justice communities. But I think the key, especially in gathering the attention of a diverse community throughout the city, will be to sort of identify what information exactly it is we're trying to gather from the public, whether that be where would you like to see more, more flowers along where you walk in your neighborhood, or whether that be what do you think of pollinators, do you notice them, etc., or whether that be do you have any place to garden where you live, or do you have any access to a patch with a lot of flowers or grasses or hedges or other things. But no fully formed thoughts other than, I guess the key would be what questions to ask that will be interesting and have that a diverse audience or member of the public will have an answer to, other than just what specific pollinators would you like to protect, which might narrow down the pool of participants a lot more. But yeah, I think really tying it back to what David was saying about people's relationship with the land around them, because I think pollinators is, the charismatic, especially if you think of bees, they're the charismatic insect. So it's a good sort of gateway to getting people to care about habitat in general.
David, I don't know if you mean to still have your hand up. Do you have something else you want to say, or is that left over?
Yeah, that's left over. I don't know how to do it.
I got it. Don't worry about it.
I actually do have to go. I have to leave, so I have to go retrieve a child.
Thanks so much.
So bye, everybody. Thank you.
Anyone who hasn't had a chance to chat today yet wanna, or hasn't had a chance to respond to this question? Any next steps that you all imagine would make sense from here on this question of, you know, there's the document we have to craft, but then there's this kind of larger outreach mission. Hey, Lisa.
I'm just sort of wrestling with like, what are this balance of what are the questions and what are the messages? Because in engaging the public in thinking about a concept, you often need a couple of sort of, you know, provoking questions. They don't have to be extensive, but maybe that's something as a group we could sort of, you know, contemplate. But I think it might also behoove us to be thinking about, like, which we've started today, like what are the core messages? Because they're so tied together. But just staying open to what we might hear from the public, because I guess that's my concern about public engagement is always like, how is it going to be used? Does it actually impact the decision making? So that's something that I would like us to struggle and grapple with a little bit. You know, if we're asking public for input, how do they see it showing up?
I'm wondering about having, I don't know if you all remember the COVID ambassadors. For a couple of years, you just see them walking around in more, you know, Davis Square and the more populated areas. And you could ask them anything about COVID and they would help you figure it out. And I wonder if we had similar, you know, I'm guessing we won't be able to really staff it around the clock, but in parks and other areas, just having people wearing something that designates that you can go talk to them and have them answer questions. Maybe even have a map of, like, you know, so people stumble upon them is sort of the point, but, you know, we could even have a map of like other places you could go to talk to people and see other spots that we currently have.
Okay, well, we're at time, so I'm gonna wrap us up from here. We don't have anyone who isn't just on the committee, so we'll skip public comment. There was someone, if you know they wanted to leave a message for us, I hope they will. Just as a heads up, next meeting in 2 weeks, May 22nd, 4 to 5:15 p.m. I think there's a lot of really good stuff coming out of this. I think the thought that Alejandra and Lisa raised about clarifying what these questions are that we want to ask might be something that we can do in that Google Doc a bit. So I might just set up a couple of questions following this meeting, not the questions themselves, questions for you to answer. That might be then another ask for in the next couple of weeks to think about what these messages, what the asks are, how, you know, then we can talk about how it might impact decision making, and we can go from there. But I do think there's a lot of great ideas coming out so far. If you need to leave, you can. Or you can keep talking with me.
Allison, a
Yeah.
couple of things. If things work out for me, I will not be here at the next meeting.
Okay.
I will hopefully be in Michigan looking for the Kirtland's warbler.
Oh, okay, that's fine. It'll be recorded. You can watch it later, and I'll ask you maybe just to share your feedback. This would be true for anyone. If you can't make it, just share your feedback on the scope on your own time, if that's fine.
When do you get the questions out? Do you know?
I'll try to have it to you by the end of this week.
Okay.
There's sort of like it's an older document. I have to get to know it and then sort of revisit things with my team, and then so it'll take a few days.
Okay. One thing I was thinking about getting out to the public is the old-fashioned having a table at various city functions. I know I've done tabling. It always drives me crazy, but you do what you have to do. Kind of an offshoot of Renee's idea of having people that you can ask questions to. So
Yeah.
Allison, do you know if we have access to have interpretation and translation of all of our documents? And
I think, yeah.
when we're out in public.
Yeah, it requires 2 weeks notice usually to get that. So we just need to plan ahead, but we can have interpreters, or I don't quite know the process for getting interpreters. We can also always bring Vanessa speaks Spanish, at least Louisa speaks Portuguese. If we need other folks, I don't know what the language range is in our own group, but if we need other folks from City of Somerville staff, I'm not quite sure. But for getting documents translated, it's two weeks is the shortest amount of time we can do.
the same should be true for any signage that we may eventually do.
Yeah. But I do think I love the idea of stumbling upon this in any context is really nice as a way to get people sort of, I don't know, engaging anew.
Allison sort of raised this issue, but how difficult is it to work with the MBTA for access to their various right-of-ways that don't have railroad tracks or bike paths, but are just vegetated corridors?
That's a question that would be better answered by the rest of the staff in my department who have been around for longer. But there's some things like trees they're not okay with within, I think it's 30 feet of the train lines. So if we're not talking trees, there might be some more ease to all of that, but I have yet to work with them, so I can't really say. But there are some, I think standards that they hold around safety around their infrastructure that we have to be respectful of, and all of that.
You also might want to talk to Lisa about, the Bikeway Community Garden up by Davis.
Yeah.
That was set up when she was the conservation agent, so she might have an idea of how that was, how they worked through the bureaucracy and the getting the land availability and so forth. Plus, I was wondering, how did the garden committee get to have a pollinator garden near the Lincoln Park playground on the bike path?
I was just on the bike path.
Yep.
Lincoln Park? Lexington Park.
No, not Lincoln Park, the little one. Lexington Park, thank you.
Garden.
Hey,
don't know
those
that
L's, they
story.
all start to run together. Lexington Park, but there's a little kind of a circular area that they planted and has a sign, and it's even on Google Maps. If you look at the City of Somerville, it says pollinator garden right there. So
I can look into the stories behind that a bit.
Anna, do you remember last summer, Anna and I were part of a group that revitalized that garden? And I know the garden club told us the history of it, and now I'm totally forgetting how they got permission to use it. Anna, do you remember?
Which park was that again?
The one on the bike path that we took out all the invasives and then replanted it with native species?
Oh yeah, that one. It was a train track and we were just removing bamboo. It was a bunch of invasives. We planted in things to, I guess, replace it. But it was like from the 90s. That sort of plan was from the 90s to start making it into a garden. And then they started removing all the like decorative plants that weren't really beneficial from what I remember. And another thing to add about translation, like when I was working, we were doing like what we could with flyers with like black swallowwort. We would pull it out and then put it in a flyer basically on a doorknob. The only problem was that there wasn't a lot of translation. There's only English as an option, from what I remember.
It hasn't helped any either because there's tons of black swallowwort around the city.
Yeah.
I do think it's a great point, and it's something, I think it was Cynthia asked for a flyer for an event a little while ago, and I was like, I can throw one together for you really quickly. And luckily the Summer Voice page, you can translate it into anything. I don't know how good the translations are, but there's an automatic translation feature on that page. So if you can get people to that page, that's more accessible. But for flyers and everything like that, I do think being very aware of the time, giving it the time so that we can get things translated would be essential.
With that pollinator garden that we were speaking of earlier on the river at Blessing of the Bay Park, when the
Yeah.
DCR came to us, we said they needed to have multilingual signs, and they managed to do it. So it can be done.
Yeah.
We do a lot of sign translations for Myra as well, and they usually, for all of our tabling events now, we have all signs in at least 2 or 3 languages, so it's really helpful. The hard part is getting people who are at the events and tabling to speak the language, but we've got some on stuff, but still.
Yeah.
But yeah. I think having a or something. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go.
I was just gonna say, I think having flyers, like an easy flyer, whether that be just about this process to get people aware that even Myra or other organizations could distribute a tabling events within Somerville would be really helpful. I mean, we have our herring run and paddle in 2 weeks at Blessing of the Bay Park, and that always gathers a huge crowd of people who are like interested in the outdoors. So something like that, or even smaller events where people could pick up a flyer on, hey, this process is happening right now. This is where you could put in your feedback. Whether that just be a quick little note like, hey, I see pollinators here, or something else.
Yeah, I was thinking after Cynthia made that request that I might just throw together a basic one and have it translated, even just with a QR code so that we don't have to print a million of them, but people can get to the Summer Voice page. And I can put that on my to-do list for this week and try to get out a simple one to have it translated. I don't know if I can get it to you by that event, but it could be available then for future events if anyone in our committee was needing one. Yeah.
I was going to change the subject. If we're finished with the translation discussion. This is a super long shot, but in the past year, a few of us were looking into the idea of using T bus stops for green roofs, and it was done. I forget, Brookline maybe, and there seemed to be little information. Like seemed like they did some pilot projects, and then we couldn't find anything beyond that. We did get through to the T, and they said, "Oh yeah, you can apply for a permit, and it's like $1,000 or something per stop," which just seems ridiculous. So
the permit itself?
Yeah, to use the roof of a bus station. So I'm wondering if the city, this was just a few little local activists, like if the city came to the T and said, could we work with you in partnership to do this and include roofs of bus stops in the plan. And I know Recover was part of the we had someone from Recover who was working with us, and they were sort of indicating it could be done pretty inexpensively. So, and I, anyway, it's something that like it would add a lot of real estate to what we have to get creative about finding spaces we can plant anything. So
Yeah,
it might be.
I think
right
as
the-
like solutions to incorporate into the plan itself, like let's track them, like let's keep them in that Google Doc. Let's like record these so that as I think the question of whether or not the city can do it is a good one. Like, I think I think it was your instinct about like, once you have it in the plan, maybe things can move a little bit more quickly. I do think that's one of the intentions of this process. It's like, if we're making these decisions ahead of time and saying this is important to us, then maybe it'll make everything else a little easier in the future. Fingers crossed, but, but like, for those kinds of ideas that come up that you'd like to incorporate into the plan, I think like, let's just keep tracking them. And then as we're working with a consultant in the future, we can, like that can be one of our sharing processes with them. It's like our own list of ideas as members of the public and, committee members with insight into the city in general. I don't know if that's something I can act on now, Renee. Were you thinking this would be like within the plan itself, or did I misinterpret?
Well, it's the sort of thing I have a feeling it will take a long time. And so
Yeah,
it would be awesome if it was a possibility, even just to be able to say, when we actually, whoever we have a consultant hired to do the plan, to say, and stop roofs can be part of the plan.
Yeah. It sounds like one of the like key pieces of information that we're going to need to understand as a group, and that me as a new employee is also trying to learn, is like, what do these partnerships look like with DCR, with MBTA? Like how do we facilitate those kinds of projects that cross? And I think that's something that maybe we ask for a bit of a download from some of the people who are like have done those kinds of projects where there was a city and DCR or a city and MBTA success story, or like, some experience where we can then learn from what those stumbles were, or how they got something done successfully. That might be something we could try to explore in a future meeting, have someone come in and talk to us about that, or a couple people. Maybe it's Lisa who can talk to us about the bikeway garden or something like that.
All right, well, I'm gonna go. So good night
Great.
all.
Good night, Michael. Thank you.
Hi, Michael.
Thanks for sticking around, everyone. I was like, I don't know if everyone will just leave. I'm glad you.
I have,
I'm gonna
before
jump.
I jump off, I have one quick question / idea. I know, Claire, you mentioned sort of getting the 20-somethings, 30-somethings on board. And I was actually having a conversation with some of my friends who we are all in our mid-20s. And one of them had this brilliant idea, because I mentioned, I joined this committee, I'm so excited about it. And she said, well, why don't you incentivize people to like plant clover in their lawns or plant pollinator friendly gardens? I don't know what the budget is for the city of Somerville for something like that, but even just like a plant giveaway or a subsidy program for residents of Somerville to be able to purchase, say, like pollinator ready like seed packs that are like a trio or a set of 4 different plants that you could easily plant in a container in your garden, or so a step above just like a guide of species, because I think even if it's just a guide of species, the next hurdle is for people to find where to buy the native variety of that species and plant it in their garden. So if a part of the action plan was just, hey, this is how the city is providing just a quick and easy like seed kit ready to plant for its residents, or partnering with a local group or a local nursery, I think that would be an even more accessible, especially for people who are in Somerville and don't drive, for example, so they can't drive themselves out to Home Depot, to a local nursery, etc. Having something like that, some partnership that people can get seeds mailed to their door and can plant them in whatever they have that has soil. Anyway, that was just an idea.
Yeah,
So
I
put
think
in
that's great.
the input. I thought, hey,
It's
that is
making me realize. Oh, sorry, Claire, go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm not sure that it's so necessarily just about the young one your age. I mean, I want to have a
Yes,
conversation
for
with
everyone,
one
for
age, but
everyone.
that helps. I think that you could also have seed bombing events, right? So,
Yeah.
right, I mean, that could definitely attract, old generation together, plus it could be fun, right? So seed bombs.
Yeah.
I mean, I say that because I have to do that on my own yard, right? I have to seed bomb that thing. It's so dry, it's just unbelievable. So yeah, these kind of things,
Yeah.
right? I think we need to be all in it together, right? So, and have this message.
I think I'm realizing one of the things that we should also sort of learn about together is what are the things that the city can do and the city can't do. Like the city can't endorse a nursery, but can there be partnerships, or like can the city push other partnerships to happen for those kinds of events? Like I'm curious what the boundaries are between like incentivizing something, giveaways, that sort of thing. If it's like going to be about the city making partnerships happen, or like what, yeah. So I'm just thinking
Oh, that's
now I want to learn about that, and I want to learn about the interstate agency working relationships.
If I can give you a little idea, I need to go after that. And next time I won't be there. I'm at a conference. So you can hear by my accent, I'm not from here originally, right? So one of the first things that I did when I arrived to Somerville was to try to find a community center the French way, where, the city has community center because the city somehow is a kind of a mediator, it's in between. And I was very surprised to not find that, right? I found a city center, but that was a growing center, for instance. I mean, if we have, if we want to lead by example and start to go in this direction, that would be terrific, because this is really places where people can talk and be together, exchange and exchange knowledge, right? Learn from one another, and again, bridge the different generations, demographics, etc. Right? So, just something that pops in my mind. I miss community centers. Let's have them here.
Yeah.
I need to go, but lovely to see you all.
Thanks, Claire.
Hi, Claire.
Bye.
I will head off as well, but